Hey there, Transformers. Welcome to Work Transformed, the podcast that tackles the ever-evolving world of product development, project chaos, and everything in between. Each episode, we'll dive into the hottest trends, unpack the latest tools, and chat with inspiring guests who are leading the charge. So, buckle up, get ready to transform your work, and let's do this.
Hey, Transformers. Welcome to another episode of Work Transformed with your hosts, Jackie and Thomas.
Hey, everybody.
In today's episode, I'd like to veer kind of off course and talk about our first jobs, like non-corporate jobs that we held in our college or post-college days that just stick with us. Like I have very fond memories of. And what I really want to get to the heart of is, are there things from those early experiences that we can pull from that has helped us be successful in our careers or helps us be the people that we are today? I could go many different directions. Yeah. So I think we could talk about more than one job if you had multiples.
I don't know. That was just a whole new spin on things. Like I came ready to talk about the job. I didn't come. Okay, we're gonna just do it.
We'll get there. So, for example, for those of you who may not know, I have a strong love for Ace Hardware. It is in my heart. I shop there, but most importantly, it was one of my jobs that I got during college that I just absolutely adored. And my mom works there currently. She worked there back in the day too. I just love the experience. And I think about it often.
You know, it's actually the first thing that popped in my mind, even though I have known you for years and knew you worked there, the first thing that popped in my mind when you said that is their jingle. Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks. And you seem like you'd be because you're a helpful person in general, but you seem like one of those helpful hardware folks. Hey, neighbor, what are you looking at over here? Combines, tractors? Oh, let me tell you about this one. Like, you seem like the kind of person who would be like super jazzed to go in and talk about different dirts and soils and why this one's great and that one's not. That tracks for me.
Did we just have a conversation on fertilizer? I think we did. So at
and
Ace
then
Hardware,
before that, we talked about patio furniture, where you gave me a lesson on what colors not to buy because the sun eats away the color quickest.
I did. See, this job has stuck with me for my life, and there are just so many things about it that I continue to think about and pull from. And so maybe just a little history. I joined Ace Hardware when I was in college. I think I was 20 or 21. I'm not sure. No, I had to be younger than that. Maybe 18. I don't know how old you are when you go to college. Math didn't stick with me. But I joined as a floor person, right? Like a person that worked the floor, put stock away, helped customers find things. My primary department was lawn and garden.
Floor person. I definitely thought you meant like a flooring person. I was like, oh, I didn't know that.
No, I was not in the flooring department. No, a floor person. So I walked around and made sure everything looked good. I stocked a lot of things, and I worked in the lawn and garden department, which was, for the Ace that we had, very big. So I would be stacking gallons of chlorine, working my muscles. Like I was all about it. Let's get this job done. Let's make this look nice. But by the end of my tenure at Ace, I was there for 4 years. I could work any department. I could cashier. I could work the mower shop and intake mowers. I could cut glass and pipe and fill propane tanks and cut keys and work in the we did bill payments. We would take like utility payments. I could do that. And I was thinking about like, why did I do all of that? And one of the things I realized about that job was I was granted a ton of autonomy to just kind of explore and fill gaps. This is like reminiscent to what we do in program. If somebody called off, I was the one like, I'll be the stock boy. I'll fill the propane tank and just show me how to do it, and that's done. And I don't know, just holds a very special place in my heart. And I want to, and that autonomy, I think, is something that has translated in all of my careers. Like, here's the problem to solve. What are you gonna do about it? And that like set me up to feel good about being in discomfort or to try those new things. And I just think that there's a lot to be said about people that gave me that experience when I was young, because it became kind of like a commonly known thing that will happen one day. And this is the way that you dive down that kind of road.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah. Interesting. So my job, anybody, I wouldn't imagine anyone who knows what my first job was, because I loved this job. Like, I talk about it all the time as if I worked there last year, and I have not worked there. But for those of you who don't know, my first job, that was the first job I claim as a real job, was at the Holiday Inn. Unfortunately, it no longer exists as the Holiday Inn anymore. It has now been I found this out a month ago. I drove past and it wasn't there anymore. Now it's a DoubleTree, I want to say. When I worked there, it was the Holiday Inn. I worked there right after they opened, and I want to say 6 months after they opened. So everything was brand new. The people were all new. The management was new. It was just a great experience. I worked in the kitchen. Isn't that amazing? You go from the kitchen to to project management for technology companies. Right. But that's what I did. I was a cook. I was not a busboy or anything like that. I cooked the food. And it was really an intense experience because I started there the summer after I graduated from high school. And imagine being, I guess I would have been 18, I guess, at that time.
Yeah, you can math better than I can math.
Oh, I just remember that I had my 18th birthday that summer. So I actually was 17 when I started. So imagine being a 17-year-old and doing this job. And the most interesting thing is, most of the time when you think about kitchens, especially larger operations, you think about a kitchen with multiple cooks and an expediter, someone who's standing there shouting out the orders, and you got 3 or 4 people cooking.
Mm-hmm.
We were not that type of operation. We were what you would call a short order cook. So you would cook the entire order by yourself. And so at any given time, we usually only had 1 cook on duty. We also did all of their banquets. So in addition to their room service and their restaurant, we did the banquets that they had as well. And so you might have 2, most 3 chefs if there was a banquet going on and heavy hotel usage. But I love that job. It taught me so much about myself and perseverance. I'll never forget my first rush on my own. So I think for the first month or 2 that I worked there, I worked with other people because they're this guy, he can't handle it. But then eventually they're well, we can't afford to keep having all these people on shift, so you either have to sink or float. And so they put me on the lunch shift, and the lunch shift was easier because during the day you only really got a 1-hour rush, and people are ordering very light things, salads, sandwiches, things they can eat quick and don't have to worry about. But dinner time is when they're ordering hearty meals. And my very first dinner rush alone, I'll never forget, because I bombed. I bombed miserably.
Oh,
Food
no.
was coming back. Food was coming back to the kitchen. People this is undercooked. This is overcooked. This has too much salt. This has no salt. Literally, for every 5 dishes I put out, 4 dishes came back. And it got to the point where we were so far behind, ticket times, we had a goal where for every appetizer it was out within 8 minutes of your order, and then if you had an entree as well, it would come out 12 to 14 minutes later. And so there was a math to it. You really should not have a ticket more than 20, 25 minutes at the most in the back. You should be constantly pushing that food out for us to stay ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
And I remember ticket times had gotten up to 2 hours. You ordered and 2 hours later, you still didn't have your food.
Oh,
and the
goodness.
Thing is, in this industry, in the service industry, most of the I was salary because people don't go in the kitchen and tip the cook, but everyone else was hourly, $2-3 an hour, and made their living off of tips. And you have to imagine, even if it's the kitchen's fault, you perceive the experience to be bad, and so you take it out on the server. You're not going to tip them well, and so these servers were pissed, big
I can imagine,
because they were get it together. And the thing I remember, there are 2 things I remember, one good, one not so great. The thing that was kind of good was, I remember my team was very upset with me, but because I had worked there at this point several months, they were Thomas, get it together. What do you need? though they were chastising me, they all like lobbied and they were like, I can make a salad. Like, I know how to do that. I can make a quick salad if you need me to make the salads real quick. I can do this. I can do that. Like, you need more tomatoes cut up. I can, like, they were really in it to win it. And I love
Yeah.
that. But then I also remember going in the back in the parking lot and crying.
Oh,
I have only cried, I think, twice in a professional setting. And that was the very first time ever. And it was tough because
oh,
it just felt like I was failing. But
yeah.
from that, I learned so many lessons of just about perseverance. Like, there's this expression around not restaurants, but just cooking in general. It's like, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen.
Yep.
Kitchens are very hot places physically. Like, you're with stoves, ovens, deep fryers. Like, it's hot in there, and like you have to have the grit and the tenacity to just see it through. But it's also
Right.
like a very high stakes, high intensity place. Like, if you ever work in a commercial kitchen, there's tons of profanity, there's tons of disrespect, and it's usually unjust. Like, the people like each other, and they just curse each other out because that's a
Yeah.
nice thing to do to one another. But it's not a place for the weak. It's not a place you can go and work if you like are very I'm trying to think of words that are not offensive, but if you are very
If you're more,
self-conscious or
I
you
was gonna say,
have
or more reserved. If you're more reserved, or
yeah,
if you
oh
don't
yeah,
really,
no, we're
yeah.
not good for reserved people. And so like I
Oh
learned
my
a
gosh.
lot about how to handle pressure, how to handle people who are like cursing at you and things like that. And again, like we were a awesome family. So at the end of the day, I love all those people. Like if I ever saw any of them today, I'd gladly stop what I was doing and go hang out with them. Like they were amazing folks, but I learned so much about that job. And the reason I bring it up so often is because it always teaches me these life lessons. You talked about
Yeah.
autonomy. There was a ton of autonomy because again, you're the only cook cooking. So like if you run out of something or you do need something, you do have to improvise. But like I don't think that was the reason I love the job. I think I love the job because it was one of those jobs where you were always learning something new. Like you think, how can you have a menu that you cook the same stuff every day? How can you learn something new? There were
Yeah.
so many lessons on leadership I got from that job. There were so many lessons on like problem solving. There's so many lessons on like even when I think about on the project management end of things, like financial accountability and making sure that your project costs are in sync. Like when you're in a restaurant, you have to make sure your food costs are in sync. You have to make sure that your paper good costs are in sync because surprisingly, paper when you're getting those to-go trays and napkins and straws, it seems like, oh, what's a 4-cent straw? But that stuff adds up. And so like I learned a ton. Let me just stop. I learned a
Oh my
ton in that job.
gosh. You got perseverance, use of metrics like the ticket times. You've got leadership
Oh yeah.
lessons, food and costs like finances, autonomy. Oh my gosh, what a wonderful job. That reminds me, I too have some experience in the food industry. So Ace was not
Ooh.
my first job. It was a job that I loved prior to corporate jobs. But my first job, I worked at a minor league baseball field for the catering company that ran the concession stands. So
I
we
did not
had,
know that. Have you ever told me this?
I might not have told you this. That job was awesome. It was like the day of my 16th birthday was my first day of work there. And there was a tornado warning. What a wild day. It was crazy.
Mm.
But like that was like very similar. We had like three like concession stands. We had, like you said, ovens and all the things to cook hot dog stoves in the back. And then in the front we had like the registers with all the other goodies, like the nachos and the Slurpees and like all that stuff. Um, but man, that was my first job, and I worked at that. I think it was like 3 or 4 years, maybe. And like it was always like a bunch of like our high school friends worked there. So it ended up being just like a fun place to go to work and to hang out. And then they
Mm.
also did like these special events too that you could do. So we had a barbecue tent that was like on the concourse, and working that, like when you were describing being in the kitchen and people being, a little reckless with their language, like that barbecue tent, man, people
Oh
did
yeah.
not care. Oh my God. But it was like one of my favorite places to be because it was just so incredible and crazy. And we had other vendors near us too. So we were just like taunting each other back and forth. Like it was so much fun. Um, I don't know what my big major lesson from that job was, but it was the first one, like, to get out there. I was a cashier, so I would be taking money. So I guess for me, like, the financial aspects, like, you had to be on with what you've charged and what you've taken.
Yep.
Otherwise, you had to answer to why is this off and like sit there and go through in these details. And so similar with Ace too, when you were a cashier, I got really good at counting down my drawer. I could almost do it in my sleep. I had like a whole method worked out over time. Like I would like count most of it till the end, and then as people would come, I would like deduct and add things. I used to be good at math. I am not anymore. It has all flown out of my brain from there. But yes.
Well, it's making room for other things that you need in life. Because calculators exist and Excel spreadsheets, and math can now do itself a little bit. So that's okay.
I also like resonated with what you said about the servers being annoyed by the cook times, because I'm the one that had a lot of different jobs. I used to also be a server at a restaurant, and I used to not get so bent on
podcast.
Yes, this is the podcast. All the jobs we've ever had. But yeah, I used to actually get more annoyed in the restaurant industry, like at my section. Like if it wasn't balanced over the course of a week or 2 weeks, because there are certain sections that people prefer to sit in. And if you get
absolutely.
like a bad table section, you're not going to be making a ton of money that night. You're not going to get happy customers because they're going to be angry. They're near the bathrooms or they're near the kitchen doorway or they're whatever. So it was always a challenge, is how to deal with difficult people. Ooh, I guess that's what I learned. Dealing with difficult
I have a story about that, but I'll save it for later. You and this baseball thing reminded me of another job I had. It was only a summer job I had in college, but I worked for this brewery. I went to school in Wisconsin. Breweries are a big thing in Wisconsin. I never worked in full disclaimer, I never worked in the brewery because I know Jackie's a big beer person, but I only worked for them in their like concession business that they did during the summer, because Milwaukee hosts a whole ton of festivals. Like, definitely would recommend, if you've not been to Milwaukee, go in the summer festival season, check out Summerfest or some of the other cultural festivals they have. It's top tier. But nevertheless, I worked in their festivals department, so they hired a whole bunch of like college and high school. I don't think they have high school students, so I think they had mostly college students who worked there over the summer and served the beer and stuff at the different tents. And I remember I did both at the state fair and at the Summerfest and some of the smaller festivals, but those were the two like really big capstone events. And it was interesting because one of the things that we talk about is like waste reduction in project management. I'm gonna bring up all of my project management applicable stories.
Bring it up.
And I remember, did I say the name of the brewery yet?
No, but I have a guess.
Okay, good. I won't be saying it. No, because I don't want this voice could be perceived as negative. And I don't want this to like be negative PR, because I really do like the company. I think they have excellent food and beer, and I think they were just doing what they thought was best. But I remember one of the things they told us was like we as the people who were pouring the beers had to be very mindful of like how much we wasted. And to the point where like they put a bucket underneath the taps, because we're outside. It's not connected to like indoor plumbing. So like everything goes really into a bucket and then gets poured out like somewhere else. And it's like they put a bucket underneath, and they would check your bucket before you shipped and after you shipped, and like to see the levels. And then like if you were wasting too much, you would get taken off of that station. You'd be put in like something else, like clean up or restock, or something that doesn't require you to do anything.
You'd get downgraded from your beer state.
Absolutely, you get downgraded. The only plus is we worked off of like communal tips, so like we all pooled our tips together, and so even if you worked for a bad station, you still got tipped like you did, which was frustrating for people who were like going above and beyond, like myself. And I was like, I'm getting 20s. That person's getting like $2. I don't think that's anyway. That's the story I'm going with here.
Sure.
I just remember this, like what they called it, the double cup method, where you put a cup under the tap and then the cup that you were pouring into, and then if your beer had too much head, you have to like let the head fall into like the other cup. And
for those who don't drink beer, that means the foamy part at the top. Go on, continue.
I was trying to be impressive. And what's called? Yeah, too much foam, which is for a lot of reasons. Like a lot of times it is a bad pour, but sometimes if the keg was just tapped, or if the keg got warm, or there were a lot of reasons why you can have this. So it's not always like user error. So if it
Yeah.
had too much foam, you'd let the foam fall to the other cup, and then like you'd pour the beer properly, which was fine. Except every now and then, like especially like early mornings or like midday on like a Tuesday where it wasn't as busy, that extra foam that's like poured in that other cup may sit there like 3 to 5 minutes before someone else comes, and so it was like kind of warm and not great. And so
My
it just reminded,
gosh.
it just like as we think of waste reduction techniques, I'm like, even just policy changes and procedures, we gotta really think things through. Because like what's good for the goose ain't always good for the gander. And like that was great for the company. We had minimal waste. All the beers got poured and purchased. However, was the quality and the experience for the customers were always great? During high peak times, yes, because the beer wasn't sitting there at all. It's like by the time I finished
Yeah.
pouring this beer, I go
You're going to the
during low
next.
peak time, it
Not
was
so good.
not the greatest. And so, it taught me like all gotta be thinking about like not only what's best for the business, but like how do you balance that with what's best for the customer? Because
You're
maybe
also
some of those
thinking of
customers won't ever come back.
That's right. Yeah, you're thinking about like how actually complex this this seemingly simple thing really is.
Yeah.
Interesting. I I don't remember, I don't know if you were talking about beer or what, but I thought of something about okay,
Beer
so
always gets you off topic. It always gets you a little bit sidetracked.
I'm like, remember okay. Yes, it does. Um so going back to the baseball park job where I worked for the catering company, they also did these things sometimes, and I don't know why I just thought of this while you were talking about beer, probably because we also served beer at baseball games, and that's like a common theme there. Um, but they also had these opportunities for people to go to these like golf events, where we would
Mhm.
have these like stands along the golf courses, and really like you had to like switch and put on the professionality and to present yourself. Because at the baseball game, being in the concession stands, we could be loud, we could be laughing. You know what I mean? It's a baseball game, everyone's having a good time. But in these like golf events, everybody was very quiet. You could barely whisper. And you had to like figure out how you were going to present yourself depending on your audience. And I feel like some of these experiences that we have given us the opportunity to learn how to be a little more professional when the time calls for it and be a little more laid back and authentic when the time calls for it. Um, and even with like Ace Hardware, I was chosen one day to go to this
Back to us. Here we go.
I always go back to Ace Hardware, but I got to go to their like paint division. Do you know where I'm talking about? It's down like 57. Um anyway,
No, because
I don't
I've
know.
never been to a hardware paint division.
Good
It's not
news,
on my
I
bucket list.
have. But we got to participate in this like a big giant presentation of a couple of different products that they were trying to highlight in our marketing and merchandising. And even there, that was like one of my first like real experiences being in like a more corporate setting and with other people and people from other companies and people from other aces and like trying to opportunities to navigate that environment where it was like pretty safe, right? Like it wasn't gonna be something where
Mhm.
somebody like called my boss and was like, Jackie was throwing spitballs at the ceiling. No, Jackie was very attuned and she was listening to how before you stain a deck, you have to wash it and power wash it. You power wash it twice. So anyway, moving on from that.
What's the second power wash for?
So you wash it first, I think, and then you power wash it. I just remember that there is a 2 times wash process, and it's to get anything remaining out so that you have these, your wood is very clean and then it dries, and then therefore will be very absorbent when you put the stain on, and it'll lock it in and, and keep it strong and make it last longer.
That's amazing.
Yes,
I don't have a
I'm
dip,
full.
but if I did, I would now know how to properly sell it.
Ta-da! Oh boy, these jobs. We learned so much from
Well,
them. And at the time, like, I didn't realize it. I was just goofing around and I had a great relationship with my boss who let me build flyers because I wanted to practice Photoshop, right? And put them in the store. Like, in retrospect, not everybody does that. Thanks,
no.
boss.
Well, when you were talking about dealing with selling personalities and stuff, it reminded me being an RA in college or
Oh,
a dorm
yeah.
advisor, or they have a lot of different titles across the country, but that person who like lives in the dorm and is like the hall captain person. And I learned a ton. I don't even know if you call it a job because it was, I don't know what it was. It's called work study, and I worked and then studied. But
Yeah.
it taught me a lot about persuasion, about professional development, honestly, even though I didn't, have a team or anything. But one of the things that you have to do, at least in my university, is you were responsible for programming. And so every semester you had to put on a certain number of events, and they had to fall into certain categories. Like you had to do one or two community service events, one or two like academic oriented events, one or two social events. And the last thing, and I worked in a freshman dorm, and
Mm-hmm.
parents of freshmen in college, please cover your ears because I'm going to talk about something that you probably are not aware of. But the last thing that college
They're
freshmen
not
do are
aware of
go to
it.
programs in their dorm. They want to go and drink alcohol. And again,
Yes, they
parents,
do.
cover your ears because you don't know this. This is all shocking and surprising to you. And I say that because parents literally would ask me during moving, they'd be like, do you all allow drinking here? And I was like, no, it's not legal, so we don't allow it. And they're like, oh, okay, great. I just wanted to make sure because some of my friends were saying that students drink on campus, and I don't like that. And I was like, well,
Why
no, we
is the
don't allow it.
voice?
No.
Hang on. Record.
I want you to
Why
ask me.
is why is the voice of the college parent the same voice that you do to interpret me? Impersonate me.
No, no, I'm going to ask. And that is not your voice. Your voice is a little different. This is the college mom's voice.
Oh, college mom. Okay,
And
very good.
so, yeah, mom, this is what real life. This I got this something on this, and they were like, they would always ask me, "Do we allow drinking? Does drinking happen?" And then they would close the conversation by saying this or something to this effect. Well, I'm not worried about that anyway. You're not going to have any problems out of my child because they don't participate in those kinds of things. I kid you not. The only parent who ever said that were the parents of the alcoholic children. Like, I don't know if they just were trying to talk themselves into believing this or they were just so like in their own world they didn't realize. But like, it was only the parents of the most intense children that would say this. And I was like, oh, okay, great. And immediately I would know, I'm like, look, that's going to be a problem, child. Because like, those are
Oh,
only the parents. The parents of people who were like, well behaved, never told me anything. They were just kind of like, okay, well, it was nice to meet you, sir. But all of the ones whose children like constantly getting in fights or arguing or drinking, and it's like those are the parents who were like, you're not gonna have any problems out of my child. So
yeah.
like, how do you handle that? At the end of the day, I was also a peer to most of these children. Like I was still in college, so they were a freshman, I might have been a junior. There was like
Right.
a 2 to 3 year age difference. So it wasn't like, I'm a 40-year-old adult talking to a 19-year-old. I'm a 20-year-old talking to an 18-year-old. Like it's not that big of a difference. And so like how do you
Right.
persuade your peers to do the right, how do you encourage them to change their behavior? How do you help redirect or reorient? Like those were a lot of skills I learned from there. And
Wow.
I was privileged. I will not lie. I was privileged. I had great guys because I worked in the all male dorm. I had great guys both years. Shout out to any of them who listened. Please send me a note. Let me know. I don't know if any of my guys would be listening to this, but I do keep up with some of them. So uh yeah, that's all I got to
Uh,
say about that.
well, speaking of guides and speaking of moms, so back to Ace Hardware, I mentioned that my mom worked there. She worked in the accounting office, and my mom was not like the college moms because she knew all of the shenanigans I was getting into, and she participated herself. So we had in the receiving area, we had like these big like scaffolds that held like tons of boxes up there, and a lot of it was old paperwork that we had to keep on file for reasons and I was not familiar with, and nor did I care because I did not like accounting. But I would go into this receiving room and I would look up and my mother would be up on the scaffolding, like digging in a box or something. I'd be like, do you want a ladder? I'm like, how did you get up there? She's like, I just climbed up the side. And so we would do stuff like that, which if anyone's listening, sorry. that's probably a huge OSHA
I was
violation.
gonna say, and hindsight sounds like a huge liability to the company.
Nothing bad happened, thank goodness. And sadly, that Ace Hardware it just got torn down this year. It was vacant for a long time. They had sold it, and yeah, so we couldn't even.
I was about to ask you, like, where was this Ace Hardware?
It was in Oak Forest, Illinois.
So, where in Oak Forest though? Like, give me some cross streets.
It was on Cicero, just south of 155th.
Yeah, so if anyone's familiar with that, there's
an empty lot now. Yeah, if anybody that shopped there is listening, say hi to me. I miss you guys. Or anybody that worked there, say hello. But yeah, my mom was always involved in like her own version of shenanigans, but I had like this kind of like wonderful thing that because my mom worked there, whenever something happened, it was nice to have additional support. Nothing like terrible happened, but one day I was pulling a mom. I was on top of the scaffolding, looking through the backstock and organizing it. And so I was standing up there, and all I was doing was moving these like, again, gallon bottles of I don't know what, something in a lawn and garden capacity. And I was just like stacking them. And then all of a sudden I like turned and my whole back spazzed out. Like I just pulled a muscle the wrong way. It was the first time that had ever happened to me. So I was like freaking out. And then I was like, how am I going to get down? Like I'm up and I got to get down. And I probably did climb up the side without a ladder like a goofus. So I had to get somebody to like get a ladder. But I remember going to the register and I knew my mom's extension. So I just picked the phone up and I called her and I just said, back register. And I hung up the phone and she came down right away. And like they had to like lay me down until my back stopped freaking out. And I was like, well, that was the craziest thing.
Oh my God.
I know.
So intense.
It was a very intense day. I have a lot of injury stories.
I have one, and then I want to change the conversation a little bit for the last few minutes. But like,
sure.
When I worked in the home, I only ever had one major injury, which is a true testament to my, cooking abilities. Because it's the kitchen is a very dangerous place, even in your home, and being a commercial kitchen, even with the pace and the volume of work that you're doing, you can easily injure yourself. But one time I cut off part of my finger.
Oh no! Are you serious?
Yeah, you thought I was gonna keep going with the disclaimer. Nope, I just wanted to slide in there. One time I cut off part of my finger. Real life story. I was cutting something and I was cutting, and I looked up. I was like, I don't even remember which one it is because like the finger grew back. Even though your fingers are not like I didn't cut off like up to a knuckle or anything. Like it wasn't that much of my finger, but it was like a good solid piece of finger. And I will never forget, like I was trying to stop the bleeding, and I was a little like, thankfully it didn't hurt because if you use a really sharp knife, you make a clean cut. Like, I mean, it did hurt eventually, but like it can just cut it off, and you'll just keep moving. So I just looked down, and I was like, oh, there seems to be a piece of my finger laying there. Anyway, so because I know some people are screaming, and I'm making a big deal for them. Anyway, I just remember this isn't. You all know my pet peeve is bad managers, bad leaders. I remember I was trying to contain the bleeding and whatever, and then one of the servers had went and got like the boss on duty at that time, because that's a major injury. And I remember her coming back there, and she's like, "Oh my God, is everything okay? Like, are you going to be all right? Do you need to go to the hospital? Yada yada yada." And again, you have to remember, I worked there for 3 years, so between 18 and 20. So I'm like between 18 and 20 years old. I'm like, I think I'm okay. Why that's I don't know. But I'm like, I think I'm okay. Just put my finger.
Oh my gosh.
Like, okay. And this is the thing I'll never forget to the dad. She said, all right, well, since you seem like you're doing all right, do you think you could just stay and finish out your shift?
What?
And you know what I said? Like a freaking idiot. I said,
yeah.
I mean, I guess so. And like this high pitched voice, I'm like, I guess so. And I stayed and finished my shift with part of my finger missing. And this is why I chastise bad managers. That's unacceptable. This person's in pain, duress. They're liable to say anything. You need to be a leader to say, you need to go to the hospital. Like, you need to go right now. I know you feel like you're okay, but that's unacceptable. Like, also, we are liable, so like we don't want this to go on the record as like we had anything to do with this. But because we worked one cook at a time, so it would have taken like 30 to 45 minutes to ring someone and get them in, and
Yeah,
like that was a
right.
whole to do, and it was towards the end of the night. It was like logistically for a manager, it was easier to say, "Can you just finish working?" Unacceptable.
Yeah.
That is a one of the few not positive memories I have of the place.
I'm glad to know that story because it does really solidify why you have such a passion for when managers don't treat people like people. And I appreciate your stance on that.
Yeah,
I kind of have like, I have an opposite story to that about what a good manager or good boss did for
to
me.
really rub it in for me.
I'm sorry. I think this is a testament that this is back at Ace Hardware. Haha, weird. But it's a testament to like the kind of like leadership I had, guidance that I had. So one, I was able to really just learn about all of the departments, right? And that gave me a lot of learning. But two, in times of crisis, okay, so this is a really stupid story. So I talk a lot. I don't know if you know this about me. I enjoy conversations.
I never would have guessed it.
Never would have guessed. So me and my boss had a playful joke that I couldn't go a whole work day without talking, with the exception of helping customers or asking questions, like things like that. And I said, "You're on." And we must have bet like $20 or something. And so it was almost the end of the day, almost the end of the shift. I was filling in as a stock person because somebody either called off or we didn't have anybody. And it was during the summertime, and we sold 5-gallon buckets of chlorine. And so I went out to the yard to put this chlorine in this man's trunk, in his truck. And the 5-gallon bucket I picked up, whoever filled it prior to this day didn't tighten the lid all the way. And so it like splashed over the bucket and onto my leg, onto my jeans. I didn't think anything of it at that moment. I was just like, oh, spilled. And then, put it on the truck. And I start walking back towards the store to go in. And I was like, oh man, my leg feels like it's on fire. And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's burning. It's really, really burning. And so I like ran into the bathroom in the accounting and finance area because I wanted some privacy, and shut the door and was like pouring water from the sink onto my leg because I was panicking because I didn't know what else to do, even though we had like a big sink like down by the key shop and all this stuff. But anyway, my boss immediately was like, "What happened?" And I told him what happened. He's like, "Go home right now. Don't like drive as fast as you can. If you are getting pulled over, just drive to your house and say, I will be with you in a moment. You need to get in the shower and you need to rinse that. You need to rinse it, rinse it, rinse it, rinse it, rinse it." And I was like, "Okay, bye." And I just left. And I did. I remember flying home. I did not get pulled over, thank goodness. I drove relatively cautiously, like, stop signs.
I don't think it works how he was driving at all.
But I did that. I got home. I remember my parents were home, and I just like ran up to the shower, and they're like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "I burned my leg." Like, I don't know. And I ended up having this, like, it looked like a candy cane the way that it ended up, like, once everything settled down, but it was like a legit, like, when you get really bad sunburn and it like gets a little bubbly, it was like that.
Yeah,
It
you
was
probably
like,
had like at least a first-degree burn there.
yes, but thank goodness that my manager wasn't like, "Oh, there's only 15 minutes left of the day. Can you stay?" Like I would be so angry. Like,
Oh my
oh, Thomas.
I feel like that was the worst story at the end because, like, I love that job and the people there were great, and that one story was not great. But like, just on the record, Holly was great. I love them. They only had that one questionable choice in decision making.
And leadership.
But that being
Tell
said,
me, yeah, don't leave on that bad
I
note.
do
Tell
want to
me
spend
one thing.
just a second.
Yeah.
One thing. What? What do you want to know?
Oh no,
I'll
I
tell you
was gonna
anything.
say,
Whatever.
don't leave on that bad note. Say something fun that happened. Like I'm all into hearing all these
Oh
stories today.
no, everything fun. Everything was fun there. Everything was fun. One time we no, it's just everything was fun. I was going to say to connect this to the listeners, because I don't want them to be like, wow, that was so cool. I got these jobs. And now what does this mean for me? I want to tie it
Yes.
back to some things. First of all, we had Andrew on recently, and he was talking about recruiting. I think this whole idea of like looking back at the past and seeing what things you enjoyed, what roles you've had, what were the draws to your role, because sometimes we have roles where the role itself is not what we love. It was the autonomy, it was the freedom, it was the opportunity to meet people, the change of pace, whatever it is. For those of you who are looking for new opportunities or have found yourself recently displaced from a role, these are the kind of things I really would encourage you to start thinking about, because sometimes we get in this rut of like, I lost my job. I need to get a new job quickly. I will do what I have always done. So I'm an accountant. I know how to do accounting. I have certifications in accounting. I have a work history in accounting. I'm just going to go into accounting, even though it makes me hate myself. Let's think about maybe
Oh,
things that are adjacent to accounting that you can do that also help you like utilize some of these experiences you really enjoy. Or maybe it's you do actually like accounting, and so it does make sense to stay in accounting. But the reason you've had such a hard time these last few months or years is because you don't like the work environment or the culture or the climate. And so you think about leaders or organizations you've worked at or with that you have enjoyed. What were the characteristics that or attributes that you enjoyed? And then as you're interviewing with these companies, interview those leaders in those companies for those attributes. Don't tell them, hey, I like working at a place that gives me autonomy. Ask them, typically, how do you engage with your employees? Like how do you hold them accountable? Ask them questions that get to, do you have autonomy? Or if you like
right.
talking to people, like ask them questions about the culture. Like use this um as an opportunity to think about what makes you happy and what makes you unhappy.
That is such good advice. And that's like reflecting on your past. These experiences, although were not corporate roles for us, really gave us insight into what we liked and didn't like. You could even, oh my gosh, Thomas, could you pivot and like put this in like your personal SWOT analysis as well?
You sure could.
You sure
Absolutely.
could. Oh man, if you haven't
And
listened to that episode, it's called SWAT It Like It's Hot, and it's about
swap
professional
like it's hot.
development. Are we ready?
The other thing I was gonna say is, oh man, I'm getting forget my spot brain. Uh, oh, this also think about something we have not talked about ever on the show and probably should.
What is
Passion
that?
projects. Maybe you're like
Oh yeah.
very seasoned in your career. You're not looking for a change of pace, so you got the perfect role. But as you think about like the experiences that you've had, you might start saying like, "Oh, I do really miss this or miss that." Think about passion projects you had either in your role or, uh, a side gig. We are in this gig economy these days where everyone is driving for Uber or doing DoorDash or all these things, but you don't have to just limit yourself to doing gigs that are through other bigger organizations. Like maybe you really enjoy coaching. Could you coach a little league team? Maybe you really
Right.
enjoy writing and creative writing. Like could you be an author or editor for someone? Like think of not only this is a way to like increase your professional exposure, but also how do you just get more fulfillment and joy out of life?
Oh, that is amazing. We will write that down as a topic. I think we can explore that for a while. Are we ready to wrap?
All right, I'm done. I'm ready.
Are you sure?
I'm
Okay.
positive. I'm ready.
Okay. Here we go. All right. So to recap our exploration today and our non-corporate jobs that we've loved, I am an Ace Hardware person at heart, and Thomas's first gig was at the Holiday Inn. Both of us found a lot of autonomy in these positions that we learned that we actually value a lot in our careers. We also learned about metrics and teamwork, how to get leadership lessons, how to balance finances with food costs and paper costs, the dealing with difficult people when you're having a hard time either with your coworkers or your customers. We talked about waste reduction, which really goes into the lean way of thinking in our professional careers, and really just trying these opportunities to see what you liked. Thomas held a very good lesson in perseverance in his first role, and I held a good lesson in how to practice professionally presenting yourself with these opportunities that come along. We tied this back to why Thomas hates bad managers and why sometimes we very much care about people development. And we also thought that there was good value in talking about that these things might maybe not be corporate, are great storytelling tools for when you are recruiting for a new role or talking to recruiting for a new role, for you to ask questions, because maybe these things bring you joy, and to do like your own personal inventory to figure out what it is that you want as you come up on your next endeavor. We will talk about passion projects in another episode, but there's always options to keep exploring what you love. And that wraps us for our episode today. Thomas, any final thoughts?
No, folks, keep living your life, keep having great jobs and great experiences. And frankly, life's too short. If you're not loving what you're doing, do what you love. Get out of there. Start something new.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Weren't expecting me to throw that, were you? Bye.